Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for calling me on this, the first day of the budget. I'm slightly disappointed, if I may be honest, to be speaking on this, the first day, but as there isn't a day allocated to foreign affairs and defence, I've taken the opportunity to speak today instead, and I hope the House will forgive me if I focus a little bit on foreign affairs, because although I welcome, like most of us, the extra resources going on to the Ministry of Defence to ensure the programmes agreed in the 2015 Defence Review will be carried out, I am a little disappointed that at this moment of immense strategic change, at this moment when not only the United Kingdom but the world is changing from multilateralism in many areas to bilateralism in many of the largest countries, I'm thinking of course particularly of the United States and China, that we didn't hear mention of the Foreign Office. And this from a former Foreign Secretary is a little surprising. But what's perhaps more surprising is that we don't see the increase in the budget of the Foreign Office that is so necessary, because increases in Foreign Office budgets can sound very large in percentage terms, but look like rounding errors when they're compared to defence or DFID, or even more so, health and social welfare. So I hope that the absence of a phrase on foreign affairs today from the front bench was not reflective of the realisation that, not reflective of the thought that this was not something to talk about, but rather is reflective that greater thought needs to go into our strategic laydown, our strategic engagement, and the position of this United Kingdom in years to come. I mean, at the very least, one could have argued for a very small mention for FCO pay, which in some cases is as much as 20% behind some other government departments. But look, this isn't a day simply for parochial or indeed international appealing. This is a day to be talking about the budget as a whole, and I welcome the opportunity to do so, because the budget addressed some very fundamental things that I see as the beginning of the message that this party, that this Parliament needs to push back and make clear. And the first of that is fairness. We need to talk more radically and more informatively about fairness. And we've heard very often, and quite rightly in many cases, about fairness in terms of welfare. And my right honourable friend, the member for Sutton Coldfield, highlighted very powerfully the issue of fairness in universal credit and the issue of fairness on those who are most in need. And I agree with him. I agree with him entirely. But other aspects of fairness have not been touched upon, and I think they are equally as important. One of those is the increase in the minimum wage, in the living wage, that we've seen since 2010 to today. Now, that has been an enormous rise, almost double the rate of inflation, and has gone a hell of a long way to increase fairness in work, because we all know that in-work poverty is still a challenge. So increasing that pay, increasing the fairness of those who are working, who are striving, who are doing their bit, increasing that fairness is fundamental to a Conservative principle. I'm glad that the Chancellor reflected it. I'm also glad that he reflected it in the digital tax that he announced, because this is something where I can't believe I'm saying this, but I agree with the Right Honourable Member for Wallasey, who was just speaking. The whole point about rentier economies is that they become very destructive. They become very undermining. And in addressing some of these so-called FANGs, the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Googles, by addressing the fact that what they have done over a few years is acquire the controlling heights of an economy. They've acquired the best programmers, the best engineers, and then rewarded them with share options and with tax schemes, effectively, which mean that, frankly, nobody else can afford to hire them, is they've taken over a rent-generating state in much the same way as other industries did at times past. So addressing that through taxation, which the Chancellor has begun on, but really does require a global response, is an essential part of reforming the economy so that we get back to what we on these benches fundamentally believe in, which is that business is good for the economy when business liberates, empowers, when business is competitive, when business sees aspiration and enterprise and innovation. That's not the same. That is not the same as the overwhelming control of a few businesses, of a few individuals, and that is a danger we have come to. So I am very pleased to see that, particularly as I have the great privilege of representing one of the finest, or three of the finest towns in the country, Edenbridge, Tunbridge and West Malling, all of which are blessed to fall in the wonderful county of Kent, and all of whom are struggling with high streets because they are being challenged, as others, by these large organisations off the high street. Now, it's true that the nature of high street shopping is changing. It's true that deliveries, it's true that online shopping has made life enormously easier for us. And I speak as the father of two very young children whose wife works as many hours as I do, and the two of us rely, like so many of us in our generation, rely on the ability to have goods delivered. So I'm not going to condemn the online economy, but recognising that the high street serves a place in our community, not just in our economy. It is part of our identity as people to come from a community where we can shop together, where we can be together, where we can understand that actually it ain't all about the cash. Now that is a phenomenally important part of the budget that the Chancellor put forward today. But he also put forward a few other things, and forgive me if I touch on this very personally. The last issue I'm going to talk about is his commitment to veterans' welfare. Many members will know that I came to this place straight after serving in the military, and I'm very proud of that service. But I'm also very saddened by some of the things I have seen in the years since. There was a report in the Sunday Times, I don't know how many read it, talking about the number of suicides in our veterans. And what the Chancellor is doing there in recognising that veterans' mental health is a particular issue is extremely important. But the bit he didn't touch on that I will push on is to go further and say, look, this is not simply the duty of the state. It's not simply up to the Ministry of Defence or up to the Army. When I returned from Iraq in 2003, I remember what I missed was not a psychiatrist or professional help. What I missed, what I failed to get initially, was understanding from a wider society, and it left me angry, it left me feeling very cut off and very isolated. Now, I was lucky, I was blessed. I had friends who saw that this wasn't going well. I had family who surrounded me with love and supported me through what was a very trying time. But this is something that is a duty on all of us, and though the Chancellor has nodded towards the direction of the state's responsibility, and I welcome him for doing that, this is something that we as a House, we as communities and we as a nation have to do together.